HCGChica. So this is reason number 5 for sometimes failing on the HCG diet, and this particular reason has to do with emotional issues attached to eating that you have not yet worked through. I see this as one of the biggest reasons for having trouble on the HCG diet, and we'll talk about why that is and possible ways to address that. It's one of the tougher things to talk about and to fix. Unlike something like your dose of HCG, that's like such an easy fix. You just go up or down and bam, everything is better. With emotional issues in eating, it's a lot harder, and I don't feel as equipped to help you guys. But I think it's, at least we can talk about it and see what we can pull away from it. Many of us may not even realize just how much of a crutch food has become for us until we go on the HCG diet. And the thing with it is, if that is the case, it's not fixable overnight. It's something that's going to take some time to overcome. With pretty much any other diet, there are some restrictions, whether it's, a certain amount of carbs, certain amount of calories, certain food groups you can't eat, things like that. However, when it comes to the total amount of food that you can eat, I don't think, aside from fasting, that there's any other diet that's as restrictive as HCG. HCG restricts everything, including the amount of food. And the reason that this is significant is because with other diets, say you go on a low-carb diet, even though you're restricted to the types of foods you eat, you're not really restricted too much on the amounts. So even though you can't have, ice cream and chips, you can eat a ton of bacon if you want, If you're on a low-calorie diet, the same thing still applies. People find ways to fill up on other lower-calorie foods, right? Things with more fiber, stuff like that. You're still eating frequently throughout the day oftentimes. So even with a low-calorie diet, you can still have food be a fairly large part of your life. So with all these other diets, there's still a way for food to be a big part of your life. With HCG, that's not the case. So all these other diets don't really make it necessary to address a life that has food as a crutch as part of it. You can always kind of find a workaround so that you can snack or eat, more food or more frequently at any given time on most of these other diets. With HCG, it's really different. It just doesn't take very long to eat 500 calories in a 24-hour period. You probably have, 15 to 16 hours of actual awake time each day, and it probably only takes 20 minutes, 25 minutes max to eat 500 calories worth of food every day. So that leaves you, many hours every day, 15 to 16 hours a day, where you have to be doing other things and not eating and being satisfied with what you're doing in your life so that you don't actually need food. And it can be very eye-opening to be in that scenario, and you'll realize, wow, when I was on low carb, I could still eat frequently whenever I felt like it. Or when I was doing low calorie, I could still eat low calorie snacks whenever I felt like it, pretty much. And like I said here, your meals are done very quickly. 500 calories is like that. And yeah, all that you're left with is yourself and what you're doing in your life. Additionally, there is a glaringly short list of foods to choose from. There's very few people who come from a background of an eating disorder or just, eating too much junky food who are gonna find steamed fennel, really appealing. The thing about food is that it's one of those things that can easily piggyback on to other activities. We eat while we drive, we eat while we watch TV, we eat while we surf the internet, we eat at business meetings and conference meetings, we eat while we're having fun with friends. I mean, there's just almost everything you do in life, you can find a way to do the activity and eat at the same time, right? And I've thought this to myself before, and not too long ago, another HCG vlogger, HCG for me 2010, she mentioned it in a vlog, and that's the fact that unlike other addictions like drugs and alcohol, you can't remove food completely from your life. Believe me, I've wished that I could. I think I'm probably not the only person who has wished that there was just a pill you could take that would be all the nutrition that you need and that your mind just wouldn't ever think about food. I've wished that before. But unfortunately, we have to eat on a daily basis, and we can't remove it. So when food has become an addiction for one reason or another, how do we remove that addiction without removing food? So I can only share with you guys what actually helped me to overcome my bad relationship with food. And if your personality is like mine, then you might find it helpful to you. So basically there are five main things that I found to be a big part of helping me to change my relationship with food. And I'll go over each of them in a second. The first one is that you have to accept the process will take time and there will be slip-ups. You are gonna screw up. The second, do a trial, and we'll talk about trying things out. 3, cold turkey or gradual, what works for you personally. 4, stop giving yourself permission to overindulge. And 5, find new outlets for times when you used to eat. So, let's talk about accepting that the process will take time and that there will be slip-ups. So my number one mistake that I made over and over and over and over when it comes to food and diets is to completely give up when I would make just even one small mistake or one bad choice. I'm what some call an all or nothing person, and I'm kind of betting that there's a lot of you out there who are very similar to me in that respect. And I had to consciously change how I thought about mistakes or what I perceived as errors and judgment, things like that, when it comes to food and dieting. I had to learn that when I screwed up, instead of giving up and then doing further damage, that I actually did have control and the ability to fix the mistake. Part of the feeling that led me to give up in the past was the feeling that I couldn't undo a mistake that I had made. And that made me feel really hopeless. It's like, say one day I just totally ate all kinds of stuff I shouldn't have eaten, ate way too many calories and just a lot of sugar or whatever the case may be, I would feel stuck. I'd feel trapped like, well, I already ate it, obviously, and there's no way to undo that in a healthy way, is what I would feel like, and I would feel hopeless. Like, you feel trapped. When there's no way to fix something, you feel trapped. And then that would lead me to give up and do further damage. What I realized was, technically, that's not true. You actually can make corrections. Obviously, you can't uneat that box of cookies, but you can make different choices for the following days, and you can correct things fairly quickly with the right tools. The 2 things that I use to make corrections for a day or a period of days that, I totally overindulged for some reason is intermittent fasting and eating low carb. Both of these I have found to be very effective. Now, these shouldn't be used as things to give yourself an excuse to overindulge, because then you get into this vicious cycle of overeating and then undereating and overeating. But there is all kinds of research out there about intermittent fasting, how healthy it is for your body. I will post some links so that you can do some further research on it on that, and I can't talk about it right now because it'll take way too long. Maybe I'll do a separate post on that another time. But this has really helped me to have a positive overall feeling just in my day-to-day life, to no longer worry if sometimes I don't make the best choice. Overall I do, but everyone is gonna not make the perfect food choice all the time, right? So now, instead of having so much negative thoughts and feelings about it, I have overall a very positive outlook. When I do that, very little time is spent in my life now on negative emotions related to those food mistakes. There might be a short period of it, but then I'm like, okay, let me plan ahead. What am I going to do tomorrow? So depending on how long I got off track, I may do 1 week of low carb, no sugar, no fruit even. I'll be super low carb. That instantly makes me feel better and it helps me get back on track. Or if it was just, off for a day or two, I might be like, okay, I'm going to fast tomorrow. And then eat low carb, and then fast another day later in the week or something like that, and that will fix it. I feel having the ability to just logically make a choice and to fix something like that, it really helps you to have power in yourself and to be in control, and then you're free to not feel so horrible about what happened because you can fix it. So this has literally been the biggest key for me to have long-term happiness about my body and how I feel about food, as well as my ability to maintain my weight long-term without it becoming an obsession. Because that's the thing we're trying to avoid. Most likely, if you've been overweight, you've been obsessed with food and dieting. And if you've been thin, you may have been obsessed with food and dieting to stay that way, or being overly fearful of gaining weight. So the whole idea here is to create a healthy relationship with food where you don't have to panic if you don't always make the perfect choice. So the second way that you can go about trying to change your relationship with food is by doing trials. Anytime, I'm a person who fears change. I don't think I really knew this about myself until recent years when we've had a lot of changes in our life. And every time my husband suggests some change, even if it's something simple like moving our bed around, I get really anxious and worried and have a hard time. And obviously it's pretty frustrating for my husband. So he read a book, and now he has this special way of handling me so that he can make changes in our life without me falling off the deep end. And it works very well, and we can totally apply it to this situation. And that is the idea of presenting every change as something to try, not as something permanent. So every time he has a suggestion, he'll be like, hey, well, let's try this for a few weeks. Let's try moving the bed for a few weeks. And if we don't like it and you're not happy, we can move it back. And boy, you know what? That makes it so much easier to try implementing changes. If I think about the reasons why I tend to fear change, it's because I worry about that change causing me to be less happy in life. And that can really be true when it comes to changing the way you eat, especially when we're talking about weight maintenance after HCG. You often do have to make long-term changes to your eating. But if you think about it all at once when you don't have any good habits yet, it can be pretty depressing and feel impossible. But as you go along, just try one new change at a time and present it to yourself as a trial. Like, I'm going to try not eating sugar for 3 to 4 weeks, and if I'm not happy at the end and life is just miserable, then I can quit and there's no guilt. I can quit with no guilt. And it really does make it easier. Now, in truth, some things do take more than 3 to 4 weeks in order to see the full benefits of something. But the idea here is the permission that you have in your mind for freedom of choice. It's amazing how much easier it is for me to do the right thing when I don't feel this invisible pressure either way, whether it's coming from within myself or from someone else, that pressure to do one thing or another. Once I feel that, it's almost like I lose my own brain power. When I feel pressured to do something, I feel like I can no longer think for myself. I no longer know how I feel about something, and it makes it really hard to do the right thing. So having that freedom of choice, that feeling of freedom of choice is very freeing. And then usually when you try to change for 3 to 4 weeks, towards the end of that, you'll have an idea if it's working for you or not. And if it seems like, wow, I'm still feeling happy, I'm not eating sugar, I'm still feeling good. In that case, then you're more accustomed to the change and it's easier to decide to continue with it. And I've talked about it in other videos, but I will also make a special post about it in the future, and that is the idea of getting off a sugar addiction. There are some really specific things that you need to do in order to get off of sugar successfully, that if you don't do, you will have a really hard time, and doing it for 3 to 4 weeks could be absolutely miserable for you. I've actually experienced that as well. So there are some specific logical things you need to do. But just the idea of trying something out, whether it's an exercise program or taking out a certain food group, whatever the case may be, putting it into a trial format relieves you of that pressure and allows you an out. It gives you an out at the end of it to be done with it, to not do that anymore. If in fact, when you get to the end, your life is not as good as it was before, you know? Okay, the third way to go about changing your relationship with food. This has to do with going cold turkey or making gradual changes and discovering what works best for you personally. I'm a cold turkey gal. Sometimes when people hear that I don't eat sugar or wheat at all, they say things like, oh my goodness, you know, that takes so much self-control. I don't know how you do that. That would be so hard. And actually, that's not the case. The reason that I have removed those things 100% is because it's actually easier. It's easier for me that way than to try to keep small amounts of sugar in. I'll explain that a little bit. When I try to eat small amounts of sugar, I crave sugar fiercely. If I eat 2 cookies at a gathering, I will spend the rest of the evening talking with people, but being distracted by trying to not eat more cookies all night long. That's all I'm going to be thinking about, craving, wishing I could eat the cookies, and wanting to eat every single last one that's there. And it doesn't matter how long I've been away from sugar, that will happen instantly if I do that. I think it's because it really was an addiction for me. So for me, trying to eat small amounts, eating in a balanced way. My husband used to be like, what if you just eat the healthy foods first and then eat whatever sweet stuff you want after that? That never worked for me. I could still pack it away after eating healthy food. It just did not work for me. I had to remove it completely. Once I removed it completely, I don't think about it at all. I don't crave sugar. I can go to a gathering, eat the healthy stuff that's there, and enjoy my time with the people, focus on the people, which is what it's all about, and not worry. I don't think about the food. That's the kind of scenario you want to find yourself in, right? So that's why I did the cold turkey method and just completely cut off certain foods and food groups. It's just far easier for me that way. Now, the gradual method does work for some as well. If you're different than me, one woman, I don't have our interview up, but one woman I talked with that lost quite a bit of weight with HCG, her method was actually gradual. The way she did it was kind of like, at first she replaced regular soda with diet soda, and then she replaced diet soda with sparkling water, and then sparkling water obviously is fine, but that, and regular water. And same thing with eating out at places like fast food restaurants. She would go there multiple times a day at the beginning. So she just took out one time a day. I don't remember if it was breakfast or not. She took out the easiest time of day when it was easiest for her to not eat, so maybe breakfast. So she stopped going to fast food restaurants in the mornings, and she still went in the afternoon and evening or whatever. And then over time, as she got stronger, she removed the next thing. And that worked great for her. She was able to make huge changes by doing it gradually and systematically like that. So that might be another thing to try. Maybe you've tried the cold turkey thing and you found that to be too hard for you. So in that case, the gradual thing might work better. All right, so the fourth way to go about changing your overall relationship with food is to stop giving yourself permission to overindulge. This is an important one, and it was kind of an epiphany when I realized it. I learned this from a book on intermittent fasting called Eat, Stop, Eat by Brad Pilon, and I will link to that in the article. But I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried some of the, eating programs where you eat clean 5 to 6 days a week, and then you have a free day, 1 to 2 days a week. When I did it, it was kind of like low carb, 5 to 6 days a week, and then 1 or 2 free days. And on the free day, you can eat whatever you want. There's no rules whatsoever. And at first, it was fun. It was fun because, of course, having a free day, I could eat whatever I wanted. However, the results of that for me was that I found myself spending all my non-free days looking forward to my free day. And I'd be planning in my head, what I was going to eat, what baked goods I was going to buy, and spending far too much time thinking about it. And then when my free day came, I completely overdid it because you only have that one day, right? So you end up making that whole day about making sure you get as much yummy goodies as possible because the next day you're supposed to go back to eating clean. So since this is the only day you're allowed to overindulge, I just went way too far with it. And again, it just made my life too much about food, too much time and energy on food. And it wasn't healthy. And also, as time went on, it became hard to get back to clean eating. After a day or two of, wild indulgence, I was so full of sugar and carbs, it made getting back on track really hard. And so then I would start having more free days, like, okay, one more free day, and then I'll get back to clean eating. And eventually, it just kind of gave up. So back to how Brad Pilon's book taught me about basically not having an excuse to overindulge. A lot of different intermittent fasting or clean eating programs or books discuss having, several days of whatever really tight eating or non-eating, whatever the case may be, followed by a splurge day. However, with Brad Pilon's program, he advocated doing your fast, and his program involves doing a fast 1 to 2 days a week, not every day or anything, 1 to 2 days a week, 18 to 24 hours. But he said to follow that up when you go back to eating, to pretend you had never fasted. Basically, to eat as if you had never fasted, meaning eat as if you had never done anything extra special. Meaning you did not have any license to overindulge. You don't think to yourself, oh, well, since I fasted yesterday, or since I'm fasting tomorrow, I'm going to go ahead and eat more today. He really suggested not thinking that way and just going on eating regular, healthy, balanced food, just as if you had never fasted. And to be honest, that was kind of like a light bulb for me. When I read that, I was like, wow, what a novel idea, And from that, I learned that is exactly how I have to live my life, that there is basically never a good reason to overindulge. I don't care whose party it is. I don't care if I'm loading for HCG. The last 3 rounds of HCG, I have loaded clean, meaning no sugar, no carbs. I do not ever let my mind go there. And believe me, my mind still tries to go there on occasion. On occasion, if I'm craving sugar, maybe because I'm close to my cycle or whatever the case may be, sometimes I'll be at a store and see some gluten-free cookies and kind of be like, oh, maybe just this once. It's been so long since I had this. One day can't hurt, right? So my brain will still try to go there at times, but I have trained myself to, our hearts can fool ourselves, right? We know that, So I have trained myself not to trust those little thoughts and feelings that pop into my head. I've learned that there's just never a good reason, for me personally, to overindulge. It doesn't matter what the situation is, what I just did, or what's coming up in the future. I always just need to make good choices about what I eat. And ever since I've implemented that, I've done well. That is the way that I have to do things. Now, for me, maybe the reason that works for me is because I have a little bit of a background with binging and overeating in that regard. So, for some of you out there, you may not relate to this, and that's fine. But for any of you who have been like me, consider thinking about it that way. I actually, part of what kind of also started bringing this together for me was after my first round, I had been eating very well, my whole round, and then for 8 or 9 weeks after that during P3 and P4. So I was eating really clean for like 3 months. And then all of a sudden, when I loaded for round 2, I loaded dirty, as people call it, meaning I ate whatever I wanted, chocolate cake, all ice cream, all of these things that I had not had in over 3 months. And it triggered something bad. I feel like it reawakened my binge disorder. And I had a really tough time after that sticking to the protocol. And when I got off of P2 on that second round, I just totally blew it and just totally started binging again. And I really felt like it turned on it triggered something again. And so, yeah, I just realized for myself, wow, that's just a place I can never go. I can never have any type of justification for there being like some good reason to just totally overdo it. There's just never a good reason for that. I'm not saying you guys have to do that, but I'm telling you that is a huge part of my success with keeping my weight off. And by doing that, it really has freed my mind in a sense, because sometimes when you just turn your brain off to something, which is why I'm so fond of the cold turkey method of just removing things, sometimes once you turn your brain off to something, it's much easier to go about your life and not think about it and not want it or crave it. When you try to keep things in a little bit of this and a little bit of that, if you have an addictive personality, it can be really hard to keep it balanced. Really and truly. Just as another example of my addictive personality, I used to dance. I'd go take dance classes like jazz and ballet, stuff like that, and I loved it so much. I would actually drive like close to an hour each way to take a 1.5 hour class. I did that 1 time a week, then I started doing it 2 times a week, and I really didn't have time to do it more than that, but I started really wanting to do it more. I was wishing I could dance all day, every day, and I actually started feeling really discontent a lot of the rest of the week, like wishing I could be doing it more. Exceptionally happy while I was dancing, but of course that's only a few hours a week, and I really had a lot of other things to focus on the rest of the week. And I found it hard, and eventually I actually stopped dancing entirely. And to be honest, it was hard for me initially to stop it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's been a good choice for me because it was just a little too addicting for me. And I wasn't able to be content in my regular life with just my regular day-to-day things. And now I don't really miss dance because I just don't do it at all. And I'm able to enjoy my life and doing the other things that I do. So sometimes you have to look at your relationship with whatever it is in your life and really kind of check things and see if your relationship with that activity or that food or even maybe a person is healthy. And there are ways to make adjustments, and sometimes it can be hard at first. You know, it wasn't easy initially taking out sugar and taking out gluten, but I will talk about some tips and tricks that made it much easier. I tried to take sugar and gluten out unsuccessfully a number of times. So I will talk about in a special article and video just how I did it, which ways didn't work, and which ways did work. And hopefully that can help you guys. The last reason number 5 for trying to work through and create a better relationship with food is to find other outlets and other things that you're interested in to do to take the place of when you used to eat. This can be hard sometimes because a lot of you ladies out there are very busy. Many of you are probably working moms, and that can make it really hard to find any time for yourself. But I just want to talk about this a little bit, just as how this worked for me and why this was important. I tend to eat I used to tend to eat when I was depressed, when I was bored. It was kind of a filler, basically. Eating was a filler for any time that didn't feel too great, you know, for whatever reason. You know, I really can't deny the positive effect that having my YouTube channel and my blog has had on my ability to make these positive changes. When I spend this time talking about, you know, making good changes and trying to help you guys in the ways that I can, this has become a little business for me. it makes me feel happy and it fills up my brain. It makes me feel busy and productive, and I don't feel the need to eat as much. Before I started this HCG journey and it kind of turned into this whole website thing and everything, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom with my son. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I love my son to pieces. And, you know, maybe people are different. There's probably some moms out there who maybe you just totally live for your kids and they give you all the satisfaction and fulfillment you could ever want or need. I'm not like that. I've learned I'm not like that. I love my son so much and I love spending time with him. But I did have a hard time for a while especially when he was really young. And my husband was working a lot since I wasn't working, and I was home with him full time, you know, and my husband would come home late, so it was just me and my little baby. You know, and especially in those early years, being a mom is 95% giving, you know. You get back some little coos and smiles and stuff like that, but there's not a whole lot they're giving back at first. So it can be a taxing job. And so you can find yourself turning to food. And I think that I did that. You know, I feel like there just wasn't enough stimulating my brain to make me feel satisfied. It's very interesting how when you have a lot that's interesting to you coming into your brain, whether, you know, whatever it is, just learning something new that you find interesting, it's amazing how it almost feels like eating actual food. I realize that many of us are quite busy, so you might think that you don't have time or energy to find something that, you know, fun or something. It can be work related. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be just a hobby, but just something that makes you feel productive. You might feel like you don't have space in your life for you at this time. But I encourage you, before you dismiss the idea, just spend a little time brainstorming and hashing it out. You know, there might be a way to do that if you spend a little time trying to figure it out. So that's it for this discussion. I hope you guys found that helpful. I really did find those 5 particular things really did help me change my eating habits. And again, that didn't happen overnight. I didn't retrain my brain overnight. A lot of these things I learned through trial and error. Making the same mistake over and over again, and realizing like, wow, this just never works for me. No matter how many times I try to eat sugar in moderation, it just never works. So I finally realized, okay, other people are fine, but it just doesn't work for me. So, and I've come to that conclusion, I've learned that, and so I just don't let my mind go outside of what I have learned to be truths for myself. So, anyway, I hope you find that helpful, and we have one more reason to talk about that can cause failure in HCG, and that's important to be aware of in order to be successful, and that has to do with undiscovered health issues. Health issues can play a big role in how your HCG journey goes and how you feel on it. Not just how much weight loss is produced, but how you actually feel on the diet, which can really affect just everything. So stay tuned for that. You can find me on Facebook, HCGChica, all one word, and my website, of course, hcgchica.com. All right, you guys, take care. Bye.